What's going on, guys? Flash Frame here, and today I'm bringing you a response video. There's been a couple of videos that have come out recently regarding Star Trek Discovery, and I've been kind of staying away from talking about it. I don't know. Discovery sits in a weird place for me, and we'll get into that shortly. But Steve Shives, whose video I will link in the description, just put out a video regarding the canonicity of Star Trek Discovery. And succinctly, I would say that his reasoning behind it is that, well, the creators say it's canon, therefore it is canon. And that's not a wrong tone to take. That's not a wrong stance to take by any stretch of the imagination. However, I think that the way that he framed some of his argument misses some of the point. Now, he's brought up that there are a couple of videos that are talking about how he calls them a conspiracy, and you know what? I'm kind of on board with that. These videos have ascertained that Discovery must be 20% different from Trek that came before, and things of that nature. You can go find those videos if you want. They're all over YouTube. But this is primarily a response to Steve's video. And I want to say, first off, I rather enjoy Discovery. I've got a lot of issues with the design. I do feel that Season 2 is on better track for the franchise, but Steve is arguing authorial intent. However, to many of us that watch Trek, a lot of us take a stance of death of the author. And let me explain. So, an author may write a work and say, hey, this was what I meant for this work to say. And they can tell us, hey, this is exactly the message that I was trying to get across with my book or my movie or whatever. However, if an overwhelming majority of people go see your movie or go read your book and take the opposite stance, then one of two things has happened. Either you completely failed on delivering your message properly, or the way that you put your message down was too open to interpretation, and people took the opposite from that. At the end of the day, for a lot of us watching Discovery that have problems with it, especially in regards to the design and the aesthetic, it doesn't matter what the creators are telling us. Because what we're seeing is, and what we're gleaning from the series as they're presenting it to us, is completely different from what they're telling us. Now, in Steve's video, he goes on to mention how you can't compare classic 60s, 70s Star Trek with Discovery. Classic original series Star Trek with Discovery. But I would argue that we've already bought into the fact that you can tech jump in Star Trek and not have that big of a problem. TOS to motion picture. There's a tech jump there. Now, the argument is that the Enterprise underwent a refit for that. However, it's easy enough to buy in that, okay, it's the Enterprise and they updated it a little bit. It's actually relatively easy to just say, okay, that was the level of technology they've always been dealing with. If we really want to, that's not that hard to buy into. If they had taken an aesthetic for Discovery that was closer to the TOS films, I think that we would have bought that easier than a series that looks like it's from the Kelvin timeline. And don't get me wrong, I actually really like the aesthetic of the Kelvin timeline. I think that it looks really good, generally, when it's not overblown with lens flare. But I do like the aesthetic. I enjoy flying and captaining or being on the bridge of the Aegis in Star Trek Bridge Crew, which is a JJ verse ship. Kelvin timeline aesthetic. I really enjoy that ship. It's nice. It's clean. It's easy to do what you need to do. But you couldn't hand me the Aegis and say, "Oh, this came before the TOS Enterprise." Like that doesn't fit, because the Kelvin timeline has a very specific aesthetic compared to the Prime timeline. So here's the overall issue that we have. The authors are telling us, hey, we created Discovery with the intent of placing it in the Prime, canonically pre-original series. But they've ignored the fact that we have canonical representation within Trek of how that era should look already. We know what that should look like. By making the creative decision to line Discovery up closer to Kelvin in look, feel, and aesthetic, you're sending a very, very mixed signal to your viewer base. A viewer base that's already been told that there is a clear distinction between Kelvin and Prime. Now, you could make an argument, and I'm willing to entertain this idea, that the USS Kelvin, as we see in the Kelvin timeline, is the updated modern aesthetic for pre-TOS through TOS movies. Like, that's their modern redo of that. We could totally go down that and make that argument, because it makes sense. Again, it makes sense to do a visual reboot. We could say that was always what was intended to modernize the timeline and everything. But that's not what the creators that Steve is defending here has told us. They've doubled down and said that Kelvin timeline is its own thing and has its own aesthetic, and Prime timeline is its own thing and has its own aesthetic. That's what they were telling us until the release of Discovery. By this logic, the creators have created a split in our reasoning. Discovery looks like Kelvin, but is billed as Prime. That does not compute. That doesn't interlink. And that's a fundamental problem. So let's take a step back here, and let's look at another long-running series that's been around for about the same amount of time. Doctor Who. Doctor Who has seen visual upgrades over years. The TARDIS has changed internally and externally with almost every iteration of the Doctor, from the first all the way up to the current 13th Doctor. Is it 13th, 14th? I don't know. I like that we have a female Doctor, though. Anyways, it was about damn time. Now, despite this, despite the advancing technology in the real world that would allow the creators of Doctor Who and the writers and directors and all to update the look and to make things look better. I mean, Daleks have gotten to look better. Cybermen look much better. Various alien races look way better now than they did, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, obviously. But they have always kept a core aesthetic to the show. There is always, a specific design philosophy behind Gallifreyan technology. Even the Cybermen, even though the Cybermen, even though they looked really cheesy back in the day, now you can see that, oh, okay, this is what they were always meant to look like, in the modern stuff. The only issue that ever comes out of the Doctor Who franchise, almost ever, is the aesthetic and changes that were made to the core of the character for the Peter Cushing Doctor Who films, which are generally argued as non-canon due to some glaring differences. But even in the Peter Cushing stuff, the interior of the TARDIS looked about right and about what we expected from Doctor Who. It wasn't until the early 2000s reboot that any real serious updates were done to the setting, and even then, it was relatively well received by the community at large, and the overall aesthetic design of Doctor Who has stayed consistent. So why then does Discovery cause such a problem? Well, that's because it's a radical departure in aesthetic and in tone. Now, I am going to preface that in that in tone as of the season 1, season 2 has been doing a much better job in the tone of Star Trek, which I feel season 1 was going much closer to the Kelvin timeline movies in tone and aesthetic, whereas now season 2 is going much closer to prime tone, a greater emphasis on exploration and discovery, whereas season 1 was all about war. And that's not to say war can't be done well in Star Trek. Look at Deep Space Nine, right? But the way everything was being handled felt like a continuation, essentially, of what was going on in Kelvin. And Discovery's going a long, long way to fix that tone feeling. And I applaud the creators for that. It's finally feeling like proper Star Trek to me. And I think that's the really important thing, is to nail the values and morals and the soul of Trek. But design-wise, I don't know. Right now, we haven't seen very many Federation ships in Discovery right now. And I think it's because they're afraid of their designs not lining up with fan expectations right now, which is understandable because, yes, we have had some seriously negatively averse reactions to some of the stuff that they've put out there. That being said, I do like the Discovery redesign of the Enterprise. I do feel it's weird that we don't keep the classic aesthetics and all, or the classic dimensions of the ship even. And I find it strange that we have things like the slit and the struts in the warp pylons. But it's, I don't know, guys, until we can get another Federation ship around Discovery, it still feels too off. And I'm not going to talk to the conspiracy, right? I don't know what's going on with licensing agreements, other than I know for a fact that some weird-ass shit can go down in licensing agreements and copyright that can result in some weird-ass backroom deals just go look at Battletech and FOSSA and Harmony Gold and, you know, the fucking sealed agreements and shit going on with that still yet, despite the fact that Harmony Gold lost a recent lawsuit to the current rights holders of Battletech. So it's, guys, IP is weird. Copyright is weird. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We can only judge by what's being shown to us and what's being told to us. And what's being told to us and what's being shown to us are not properly connecting. It's different. It's not working together. It's butting heads. So that's what I wanted to put out there, guys. What are your thoughts? Do you think that Star Trek Discovery is Prime timeline or Kelvin timeline? Now, I'm not going to say Discovery is non-canon. Discovery is clearly canon, but we also need to make a distinction of, is it Prime timeline canon or Kelvin timeline canon? Because that matters to people. Are we continuing on the timelines set forth by the Kelvin split, or are we continuing from, you know, the Prime timeline? And one of the big things too that I want to put out there is, if we're continuing from the Kelvin split, then that's fine. We can retcon the movies if we so desire to make, you know, to make Discovery work. It wouldn't be that difficult to put this on a in a way that fans can digest. But when I look at a show and I'm told it's Prime and I look at it and it looks like Kelvin, there's a problem there. And you can argue creative freedom all you want, but you're telling me one thing and you're doing something different. So let me know what you think, guys. You know, like, subscribe, I guess, all that shit. I'll see you guys in the next video and probably on a live stream pretty soon. So take it easy, guys. Later.